We shot that sequence twice at the exact same time using a dual camera rig. One camera had a Sony lens on and the other a brand new budget cine lens that's been popping up everywhere on YouTube, the THYPOCH Simera-C. So, what do you think? Was that the Sony or the Simera-C? We'll come back to that a bit later in the video. Anyways, I wasn't planning to make a video about these lenses, but I wanted to see how they behave in the real world in a setup that actually reflects how I shoot. So I took them to my friend Jeremy, he's also a DP, and we built a simple rig. Two Sony a7S bodies, same settings, same framing, and we first compared the Sony 35mm GM to the Simera-C 35mm T1.5, and here's what we found. The first thing you will notice right away is color. The Simera-C lenses are quite a bit warmer. It's not a problem, it's easy to fix in post, but it's just something to be aware of. For the side-by-side test, I corrected the Simera's footage to match the Sony look as closely as possible. Also, I didn't use any ND filters. I wanted the image to stay as untouched as possible. So shutter angles weren't ideal, and if the motion looks a bit harsh, that's why. Sharpness is probably the biggest technical difference. The Sony GM is clearly sharper, even wide open. Especially in skin, hair, and edge detail, it's noticeable. The Simera lenses are softer at t1.5, but sharpen up quickly when you stop down. Micro contrast is another difference. The Sony gives a bit more bite, midtones and fine textures just pop a bit more. The Simera looks smoother, it flattens the image a bit, but the softness can actually be forgiving, depending on the look you're after. The Sony's bokeh is clean and round. The Simera has more swirl and movement. Sometimes this is beautiful, sometimes it can be a bit much. It really depends on the background. Flare was actually a pleasant surprise on the Simeras. In the right light, you get this really nice rainbow arc. It's expressive, but not over the top. It's something you don't really get from most modern lenses. With the Sony GM, you mostly get a greenish, digital-looking photo flare that I personally don't love. Chromatic aberration, you will see it on the Simera wide open, especially around high contrast edges. The Sony handles that better. And one more thing to note, in harsh lighting or strong backlight, the Simera lenses tend to lose a bit of contrast. You can get like a light haze depending on the angle. The Sony glass holds contrast better overall, it stays cleaner and punchier even when the light gets a bit tricky. And finally, focus fall off. With the Sony, the transition from sharp to blur is pretty quick. It gives the subject a crisp background separation that can be really nice, but sometimes it almost looks a bit artificial, like the subject's being green screened into the shot. The Simera's fall-off is slower and smoother, the subject blends more naturally into the background. This is not better or worse, it's just different, and honestly I really like how it looks in certain setups. So overall the Sony glass is technically more refined, but the Simera lenses have more character, warmth, texture, flare, and that gradual fall-off. Manual focusing on the Simera is excellent, the focus throw is long and smooth, it's great for follow focus, but it's too slow for handheld or fast-paced work, so if you're shooting run and gun, it is just something to keep in mind. The aperturing feels a bit too loose. I bumped it more than once during the shoot and I just wish it had a bit more resistance. The filter thread is 62mm, so if you use 67mm filters like I do, you will need a step-up ring. It's just a shame that if you put on the ring, the original lens caps don't fit anymore. On our test day, Jeremy's kid was also hanging out and he brought his 3D printed Mandalorian helmet and a blaster, so we decided to make something cool. No lights, no shot list, just a fun sequence, the one you saw in the beginning of this video.
Klar.
We shot it with the Sony Zeiss 55mm, this one right here, and the Simera-C 50mm T1.5. So now let's go back to that, but this time I'm going to show you both versions next to each other so you can see if you can spot the difference. So, could you tell which one was which? In case you couldn't, A was shot on THYPOCH and B was the Sony Zeiss. The differences are subtle, but if you look closely, you will spot them. Again, the Simera has slightly softer roll-off, the Bokeh is more textured, especially in the wide shots. The Zeiss, on the other hand, holds contrast more tightly and the edges are just a bit crispier. But honestly, both of them look great, both feel cinematic, and that has a lot less to do with the lens and a lot more to do with the light, the framing, and the tone of the scene. Also, everything you've seen so far has been clean, so no halation, no grain, no bloom added in post. Normally, on a project like this, I would add those things, a bit of glow, a little texture, because it fits the style and helps support the mood. The lens is just one part of it, and sometimes it's better to have a clean, sharp lens because you can always add some texture in post, but to make a lens look more clean, that's pretty hard. Sometimes, yes, a lens that's a little less perfect might actually help, but in the end, a lens just shapes the last 5% of your image. The rest is down to other factors. So, should you buy any of those lenses? Build quality is solid, compact, all metal, and premium feeling, especially for the price. They're fast, full-frame cinema lenses that actually deliver a look, but as always, it depends on what you shoot. If you're doing interviews, corporate work, or anything that needs to look clean and consistent, I would probably stick with something like the Sony GM or Sigma Art lenses. They're sharp, neutral, and safe in the best way. But if you're working on narrative projects, music videos, or stylized commercials, the Simera-C might be a strong creative choice. The lenses aren't perfect, but they have character, and in the right context that can matter more than technical perfection. Just don't expect them to make your work more cinematic, because they won't. That part still comes down to how you light, frame, and tell the story. So, could you spot the difference? Would you shoot with the Simera-C lenses, and what do you think of them? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your take, and thank you for watching. Yeah, there's the sun. Great.